Here with John Ramdeen and Robin Black as we head into the weekend. The UFC has had a relatively quiet month, but lots going on this week, and they present their second card of October, which is nothing, really, when you look at the schedule coming up in November and December. It's about to get very much crazy, but they're back in Ireland. We have a new main event as Luis Smolka is taking on Paddy Holohan, but as we go down the card, there's a lot of interesting guys that are fighting on this card. Robert Whiteford is back in action. Stevie Ray, who's been training at TriStar with Firas Zahabi. Tom Breeze also training with TriStar. Aisling Daly is on the undercard.
So basically this is a Cage Warriors card is what you're saying.
It kind of is. And I think that we have to admit that these things are true today. There was a time...
Pendred, Paddy, all of Europe's best.
But, you know, when you look at any kind of business, they acquire other businesses. This is what happens in the business world. And the UFC at one time did 8 shows a year, then 12, then 14. Eventually, like, we need all these guys, and that's just the reality. And we can freak out sometimes, and we do. Hey, man, we'll freak out as much more than the next guy. But the reality is, if you have 40 shows a year, sometimes you gotta unofficially acquire all of the people from these cards and put them on UFC cards. Add your sizzle, add your brand, add your presentation, add Bruce Buffer, it's time, and add all that stuff, and make it a UFC show.
The problem is that the UFC hasn't explained that to people. When fans tune in, they see the UFC brand, and they expect to see a certain quality, level of quality of fights. But it just changes from event to event. There's sometimes that's like, okay, you're giving us these fights on free television and then making us pay for Demetrius Johnson, who apparently the casual fans don't like. So it's just, I think the UFC has to do a better job of explaining what these fight cards are and what they mean. Do you want to see the next crop of European talent? Tune in to Fight Pass because you're going to see it, or tune into Fox to see some of the biggest stars in the organization.
Well, I think they largely got it right with this card. This was designed for that market. It sold out immediately, and a lot of credit has to go with the main event that you're not getting any longer. However, I don't think many people are refunding their tickets. And the fact is, when Ben Rothwell wanted to stay on this card when Stipe Miocic fell out, they said, we're not going to do a rematch with Matt Mitrione. We don't have a suitable replacement. Ben Rothwell's not going to fight on this card. That was kind of their explanation. If that was a pay-per-view...
They already sold the tickets, that's why.
Exactly. You're not selling this on pay-per-view. Yeah. You have to analyze pay-per-views versus Fox cards versus Fight Pass. They are different tiered in terms of emergency and whether we need to throw our hands in the air. Oh my God, we lost our main event. It's not the catastrophe I think some make it out to be, where if you lose your pay-per-view main event 3 days.
For sure.
But casual fans are looking for stars. They tune in and it's like, I literally don't know
anybody. Is this a card for
anybody.
Casual fans?
No.
This is a subscription service.
Yeah, and that end, there is, and you point out often casual fans and hardcore fans, and that is true of everything now. I don't care what it is. You want chocolate, you got cheap chocolate, and you got super expensive chocolate. You want to buy some furniture, you got IKEA, and then you got really expensive furniture. It's true. And there are people, and we are among them, and so are you, because you watch Fight Network, who are like, we want all these shows. Okay, where do I get it? You got to go find this one. You got to, where's the Fox Sports 1? Where's that? Fight Network? What's that? You got to go find them. And then they have the big ones. Ronda, Weidman, Connor, and they go out and they find you. And there's both sides of it now. And I don't think that middle is there anymore. There's nobody who kind of likes fighting. There's people who love fighting, and there's people who tune in for the huge stuff. And the people who love fighting, they love to complain and they love to engage each other in conversation about how good this card is or isn't. But they're either watching it or they're not. And we're going to be commentating in Prestige in Weyburn, Ontario. And we are going to turn
Saskatchewan.
this on. Weyburn, Saskatchewan, sorry. And we are going to turn this thing on right before to get excited and pumped up, and then we're going to go call that
awesome.
card.
That is going to be happening on Saturday for you guys. But of course, Saturday here on Fight Network, we're going to be airing the main card. And it goes to your point, John, as well, about the amount of fighters that have been signed to the UFC. And they've kind of run into an issue regarding that, where their numbers are so high. People have gotten hurt. They need to bring in people at the last minute. They typically give them those 2-fight deals. And now there's too many guys to give them those amount of fights within a year. They created a whole card in December just to fulfill certain people's contract obligations to get all those fights in. And now we've seen some mass cuts now as a result of so much of a roster that you have to trim down.
I think the only way to deal with this situation is really for the UFC to purchase every organization out there, use them as feeder organizations, and just take the best talent they can possibly find, because there is still good fighters around the world. Jesse Taylor, I think, would handle a lot of fighters that are fighting in the UFC right now. Mamed Khalidov will handle a lot of guys. The UFC has to go out. They have to find these guys. They have to pay them whatever they're worth, bring them over to the organization so that there's marquee fighters available for them at all times.
Yeah, if you want to, there are a lot of times, whatever we're really into, we will all kind of freak out. Oh, why is the UFC doing this? Or if you're really into video games, you'll be like, why is this video game company doing this? A lot of the things that we're trying to figure out, where we're lacking in information, every single one of us, is how business works. Often when we're like, this was a dumb move, why did Dana do that? First of all, Dana probably had nothing to do with it. It was some bean counter who made some choice based on some spreadsheet. This is how business works today. So things that we're trying to explain or argue or debate about how and why these things happen, we're missing like 95% of the information, which is why the three of us and a lot of the people out there who cover fighting, sorry, I said a lot, a couple of the people out there who cover fighting try to zoom you back to what's important, which is the fights that are happening in the cage.
And you made a great point. The fact is that they're not going to sell any more tickets by having Ben Rothwell on this card or Andrei Arlovsky on this card. You sell as many tickets as you're going to sell. It's like they were talking about back in the day bringing Wayne Gretzky to Toronto. But is Wayne Gretzky going to sell one more seat? It's impossible when the venue is full. And that's what it comes down to. So if the tickets are already sold, there's no need to put any other big-name fighters on the card.
Last thing in regards to Joseph Duffy and Dustin Poirier, is this a fight you try to put together at a later date? Or if you're Dustin Poirier, do you look elsewhere?
Yeah, I don't necessarily. I mean, the fight was intriguing, but I think that Joseph Duffy should find a different path. Eventually, they'll make their way. I just felt that Dustin Poirier was too experienced. He'd faced too many good guys throughout his mixed martial arts career. And maybe if Joseph Duffy gets on a winning streak against some top-level guys.
This fight was certainly catered to this market specifically. It means less in a Las Vegas.
Yeah. Poirier 3 years ago would have fought anybody, anytime on short notice. Ross Pearson, let's do it. Poirier now, well, man, I consulted with my team. They didn't want to. I think Poirier has to find that pocket right in the middle that's perfect for him because he's a brilliant fighter.
All right. Tune in Saturday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We have a full 1-hour pre-fight show getting you set for the main card from Dublin, Ireland, airing here in Canada on Fight Network at 4 p.m. Eastern.